GoForThe2.com in with the Week 9 college football predictions. Week number 8 was a little bit of a reset, but we still saw marquee games in the Big 12 and SEC respectively. Saw Oak State step up as a 6.5-point dog. We saw TCU rally from an 18-point deficit and get the winning cover at home in Fort Worth. And we saw LSU step up and dominate 7th-ranked Ole Miss 45-20. They head into the bye week hitting on all cylinders before that battle against the Alabama Crimson Tide on November 5th really sets the stage for great weeks of action in week number 9 and week number 10. Going to be about 7 picks on the video. If you want all the analysis of the top 25 battles, tune in to Carver and Lisi every night, Monday through Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight, Sirius Channel 159 and SportsGridRadio.com. We give all the best bets on Friday night, all the analysis throughout the week. So tune in Monday through Friday, SportsGridRadio.com and Sirius Channel 159. And then Saturday mornings, we get you prepped and ready for kickoff. College football today, 9 a.m. Eastern to noon, right up to kickoff. SportsGrid.com for the video portion and Sirius Channel 159, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern. We get you prepped and ready. Best bets, prop bets, you name it, we cover it. College football today. Let's jump right into the video. Going to be about 7 picks, and it's a breakdown of some in terms of where is the mindset of some of these teams. And what I mean by that is let's start in the Big 12. We have Oklahoma and Iowa State. We have Oklahoma that rebounded a couple of weeks ago against Kansas, got the win and cover. They put up over 700 yards of total offense, pounded the rock for 298 yards on the ground. Dylan Gabriel returned. They hit on all cylinders. He completed over 60% of his passes, and now they head on the road to face an Iowa State team that is reeling. They have lost 4 straight in the conference. They're 0-4, have played very close games, but have not been able to crack through in terms of the victory. And where is the mindset of Iowa State and their head coach, Matt Campbell? Matt Campbell's been linked to a number of jobs in recent weeks now with Nebraska and other jobs opening. Is he checked in or is he checked out? And more importantly, what is the mindset of the Iowa State team heading into this matchup? When you look at the offensive perspective, Hunter Deckers is thrown 13 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. They're not running the football as consistently as they were last year. They're only averaging about 130 yards on the ground. They've allowed a lot of sacks this year from an offensive perspective, and that's a cause of concern still going up against an athletic defensive front in terms of the Oklahoma Sooners. You look at Dylan Gabriel, he's still playing clean with the football. This is an Oklahoma offense that's averaging well over 200 yards on the ground, averaging well over 4.5 yards per carry, and I think they could put pressure on Iowa State on the perimeter. I still like the speed of Oklahoma over the top. I think they start fast, force Hunter Deckers to match them score for score, and I don't think they could do it. Oklahoma laying a short number. The line opened up at 2.5. It's down to 1.5. I think the Sooners roll in this ball game. They've won the last 2 in the series by an average margin of victory of 6.5 points per game. Picked up this victory last year, 28-21, and I see that Oklahoma can win this ball game anywhere from 7 to 13 points Saturday afternoon in Ames. On the flip side, we have Arkansas traveling to Auburn. We have an Auburn team that has won 6 straight in the series, the last 4 by an average margin of victory of 22.6 points per game. But this is a team that's lost 3 straight, gave up 448 rushing yards to Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. Their coach, Brian Harsin, is on the hot seat. And what can we expect coming out of a bye week from the Auburn Tigers? From the series perspective, they have owned Arkansas, but they don't have the better quarterback in this matchup. Auburn's only has 5 passing touchdowns all year and 10 interceptions. Their defensive front has given up 207 rushing yards to opposing offenses. And on the flip side, we have KJ Jefferson playing lights out, still clean with the football. 14 touchdowns, 1 interception. Arkansas averaging 4.9 yards per carry and 240 rushing yards on the ground. Even if they're trailing in this matchup, they have the quarterback that can lead them from behind, laying 3.5 on the road. I think Arkansas does in fact cover this number and win this ball game by double digits. just think they're in a better spot mentally with Sam Pittman fighting for bowl eligibility as opposed to Brian Harsin that potentially might have lost this program. And I don't like the quarterbacks of Robbie Ashford or TJ Finley in terms of the passing identity of the Auburn Tigers. I think Arkansas rolls and covers this 3.5-point number Saturday afternoon on the Plains. Let's take a look at the big game in terms of the Big Ten. We know Ohio State dominated Iowa last week, put up over 400 yards of total offense. They forced 6 turnovers against the Iowa Hawkeyes. They covered the 29.5-point number going away. Now they go on the road. They have won the last 5 in the series against Penn State by an average margin of victory of 7 points per game. Picked up this victory last year, 33-24, but did not cover the 19.5-point number in Columbus on that Saturday night. They're only 1-5 over the last 6 games in terms of the ATS perspective. The only game that was sort of close from the ATS perspective was 2 years ago during COVID. Depending upon when you got the line, it fluctuated from 12.5 to 13.5. The game landed on 13. The kid hit the upright and missed the extra point on basically the last play of the game. Otherwise, Ohio State would have covered. But you look at Penn State right now. They got a dominant home win, laying 4.5, 5 points against Minnesota. They are an amazing 37-7 straight up at home in Happy Valley since 2016. That's an 840 winning percentage. We know that Ohio State's one of the most explosive offenses in college football. We know that C.J. Stroud and those wide receivers can challenge everybody over the top. I know that Ohio State's converting 52% of third down conversions and holding opposing offenses to 24% of their third down opportunities. But how do you beat Ohio State? You have to run the football. You have to be able to sustain drives. You have to be able to match up in man-to-man coverage and, more importantly, force turnovers. And that's what I think Penn State can do at home. They're averaging 178 rushing yards on the ground. They have a multitude of backs that they can rotate in to keep fresh legs in there at all times. Sean Clifford plays much better at home than he does on the road. Penn State is +7 in turnover margin, and I still like Joey Porter and those defensive backs matching up against those wide receivers to force drives down the field, not give up a lot of chunk plays. Even though they got abused by Michigan in the ground game, I think Penn State's well within this number from start to finish. Don't know if they win it, but I do feel they cover the 15.5-point number Saturday afternoon at noon against Ohio State. Let's turn our attention to a couple of ACC games. We have a pretty intriguing one at 3:30, Wake Forest and Louisville. Wake playing lights out. They got the winning cover coming out of a bye week against Boston College. They did pick up this victory last year, 37-34. Line open up at 6. It's now down to 4.5. We have 2 hot quarterbacks in terms of Sam Hartman and the Wake offense averaging over 40 points per game. And we have Malik Cunningham that got a gutty home win over Pittsburgh last week as a 1.5-point home favorite. They got a sack and fumble against Keaton Slovis. They were up 17-10. They scored off that and never looked back. They won that matchup 24-10 over Pittsburgh. Now, the numbers suggest that you pick Wake Forest because Scott Satterfield is 0-10 since 2019 straight up against AP top 25 opponents. Hasn't won against a top 25 opponent in his tenure in terms of Louisville. But there's a couple reasons why I lean to the Cardinals here. The one is they're playing at home. 2 is they can pound the rock. They're rushing for 195 yards on the ground. They have a mobile quarterback in terms of Malik Cunningham. He's been a little bit banged up, 5 touchdowns this year through the air, but we know about his athleticism. Coupled with the fact that I still like the way Louisville's front seven's playing. They're only giving up 138 rushing yards on the ground, 24 total sacks. They can get after the passer and force Sam Hartman into predictable third downs, and they're opportunistic this year, +4 in turnover margin. Also, if you look at Wake Forest, they played 2 quarterbacks this year that are sort of mobile. Obviously, DJU, they lost that ball game in overtime. He rushed for 51 yards in that ball game. And Caden Sloter and Liberty, they pounded the rock for over 200 yards. Sloter had 71 yards on the ground, so that can open up the rushing game for Malik Cunningham. They're catching 4.5 points at home. I think they win the ball game outright, calling for the upset. Louisville over Wake Forest Saturday afternoon in Kentucky. I like Satterfield to pick up his first victory over a top 25 opponent this coming Saturday, I like the Cardinals with the points. Another ACC battle. We have Miami. We have Virginia. Virginia got this victory last year, 30-28. They were basically a 6.5, 7-point underdog on the road in South Beach. They won the ball game outright. Miami was in a position, missed a field goal at the end. Manny Diaz got fired a couple of games after that, and Miami never looked back. Miami's on a 3-game losing streak. Mario, big chest, crystal ball, can't coach this team up. They didn't cover as a 7.5-point favorite last week against Duke, lost, and got abused by the front seven of the Blue Devils in this matchup. But they go on the road. We've heard a couple of things, too. Virginia's on a 2-game winning streak. They picked up a victory last week after Jeff Sims went out as a 3.5-point underdog. But we've heard Tyler Van Dyke come out and say he likes playing on the road opposed to playing at home because nobody shows up for home games. They're 1-1 on the road this year, and this is Tyler Van Dyke's opportunity to step up and showcase that that was, in fact, for real. Miami's laying a very short number. Line open up at 2.5. It's down to 2. I still think Miami can run the football. They have the more consistent quarterback in terms of Tyler Van Dyke over Brennan Armstrong. Van Dyke, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. They're averaging 316 passing yards per game compared to Virginia, who's only averaging 237. And more importantly, that is down from 392 a year ago. It's not the same offense for Virginia and Brennan Armstrong. He only has 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Last year, Armstrong was one of the most prolific quarterbacks in terms of all of college football that threw 31 touchdown passes. Statistically, Miami's still good against the run, giving up 111 yards on the ground. Virginia still can't run the football consistently. They're only averaging 130 yards against opposing front sevens. They're not consistent in terms of third down conversions, only converting 31% of their third down opportunities. Virginia has no speed on the perimeter. They don't have a big tight end like they did last year with Jelani Woods. I think Miami could win this ball game pretty convincingly, laying a short number, 2 points. I think they win it anywhere from 7 to 13 points Saturday afternoon in Charlottesville. I think Cristobal does have the coaching advantage over Tony Elliott in the spot, even though Virginia has won 2 straight. Miami does cover this number Saturday afternoon in Charlottesville. Another big battle takes place in terms of the Big 12. We have Texas Tech and Baylor. Texas Tech lost this ball game last year, 27-24. They're playing and hitting on all cylinders. They were laying a 7-point number last week. They bet it down to 4.5, and somehow, some way, Texas Tech started fast and just dominated from start to finish. JT Daniels and that offense, I mean, they held them to 71 rushing yards on the ground and made them completely one-dimensional, jumped up to a 31-10 lead and never looked back and just won that ball game going away at home in Lubbock. They're hitting on all cylinders. They're 4-3 on the year. It took one step closer to bowl eligibility. Tyler Shuck potentially could play in this ball game, or they're going to go with the third stringer Morton in this matchup. But still, you look at Texas Tech, you look at the teams that they've played. They played Texas at home and won. They played West Virginia at home and won. They struggled against more physical teams up until this point in the season. Baylor's still a very physical interior offensive defensive line type of team, and they could still dial up blitz packages with Dave Aranda. And I think that's the matchup that's concerning if you're going to back Texas Tech here. Texas Tech's offensive line, 24 sacks allowed. I think that gives the advantage to the front seven of Baylor. Baylor pounded the rock for 273 yards against that front seven last week against Kansas. Blake Shapen didn't play all that great, but he still has 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Still like the running game of Baylor on the road with the defensive front seven and the secondary matching up against Texas Tech. I just think Baylor's a little more balanced, has a little bit more solid defensive players than Texas Tech. And it's going to be a very close ball game. But in the end, I do feel the Baylor Bears prevail and win as a 3-point underdog outright in Lubbock over the Red Raiders. Final matchup is Notre Dame on the road against Syracuse. They've won 4 straight. The last time they have played in the series was back in 2020. We saw Syracuse cover against Clemson. They were in potential striking distance, could not close the door, lost that ball game 27-26. Now they come back home. they're hitting on all cylinders as well. I mean, they're 6-1, they're 5-0 at home, and have dominated even Clemson in terms of that ball game. They were very good and opportunistic in forcing turnovers in the first half of that ball game, but they didn't get the running game going the way they would like. Sean Tucker only 5 carries in that matchup. They pounded the rock for 124 yards on the ground. That is nowhere near where they were in terms of an average, about 170, 180 for the year. Here's the other factor as well. You look at Notre Dame, they pounded the rock for 223 against UNLV last week. Every time Notre Dame has rushed for over 200, they've won all 3 ball games. They've won those 3 games this year by an average margin of victory of 14.6 points per game. Is Syracuse worn out? Or are they going to be fresh playing at home in terms of Syracuse? I don't know, but I would take the more consistent running game right now. I think that's Notre Dame. But I expect Drew Pine to step up and play well. He has 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Look for Notre Dame to throw early to open up the running game. The only thing I don't like about this matchup, in terms of why I'm not 100% in, even though I'm back in Notre Dame, they're still negative in turnover margin. Syracuse is +7. That's a cause of concern going on the road, but I still feel Notre Dame can pound the rock on that front 7. Let's not forget, Clemson rushed for 293 yards, a majority of that in the second half, and I think Notre Dame could do that early on, but it's the passing game of Pine. He's aggressive on first and second downs. That opens the running lanes later in the first half, and look for Notre Dame to strike the upset as a 3-point dog. Those are the picks for the weekend. Oklahoma -1.5. We have Arkansas -3.5. Penn State plus the 15.5. Louisville plus the 4.5. Miami minus the 2. We have Baylor plus the 3 and Notre Dame plus the 3. We'll see you on Saturday. Have a great week, everyone.